Hi, my name is Paul Rimmer and I am the candidate in the forthcoming election for the Merseyside Police Commissioner. I will be standing for the English Democrats, a party committed to holding the police service and our political masters to account. Hillsborough showed the importance of transparency and openness. For 23 years, Hillsborough families have been denied justice for the 96 who died and the 766 who were seriously injured. In 1997, following Blair's landslide victory, there were real hopes that a fresh approach to the tragedy would reveal the truth. But the incoming Labour government, instead of listening to the families and putting the tragedy in its true context of criminal negligence by the police, chose to maintain the establishment cover-up. Promises of a full inquiry was scaled down to a mere scrutiny, and Jack Straw effectively stitched up the victims and sided with the powerful. Jane Kennedy, a government whip and Labour MP for Wavertree at the time, was given the role of mollifying the Liverpool public. The Liverpool Labour MPs did not stand up and be counted, as Trevor Hicks implored them, but rather stayed on message and played their part in the New Labour spin operation to neutralise the local media and suppress the righteous anger of the Merseyside public. This was all documented by Linda Rushton in a memo she wrote, recording a meeting between Jack Straw and Jane Kennedy and the other Liverpool Labour MPs. This memo has been described as ludicrous by Jane Kennedy, but is simply a normal Whitehall document, a normal Whitehall account of a Westminster meeting. Watch this video and make up your own mind whether Jane Kennedy ratted on the Hillsborough victims. I believe she did, and that her present campaign to be Merseyside Police Commissioner is an insult to the families denied justice for so long.
Do not be afraid of them, for there is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed. What I tell you in darkness, speak it in the light, and what you hear whispered, preach it on the housetops.
On September the 12th, 2012, the Hillsborough Independent Panel made its report into the Hillsborough disaster after studying thousands of previously unpublished documents and files. Over 400,000 documents and files have been put onto the internet.
To point out that on this panel we all bring different expertise. I suppose the expertise I bring is as a pastor and somebody who is committed to a just and fair world. And it seems to me that that lies at the heart of the work that we're doing in the panel, that we are looking for truth and for justice.
This short film looks at the behaviour of certain Labour MPs in Merseyside during certain periods of 1997 and 1998. The Labour Party, when in opposition, promised Hillsborough families that if and when they came to power, they would order a new inquiry into the Hillsborough disaster. But the promise of a new public inquiry vanished when Labour came to power in May 1997. The new Home Secretary, Jack Straw, on meeting with the bereaved families, sympathised with them and promised them that there would be, instead, an independent judicial scrutiny to inquire into the disaster to ascertain whether there would be enough new evidence to warrant another public inquiry. He stated that Lord Justice Stuart Smith would head the scrutiny. The 18th of February 1998 saw families making the by now familiar trip to London, this time at the invitation of Jack Straw, who wanted to tell them first of the outcome of the scrutiny prior to him announcing it in the House of Commons. Ominously perhaps, he met them in room 13 in the House. He described Stuart Smith's scrutiny as thorough and impartial. However, he went on to say that nothing of any significance had emerged to warrant a new inquiry. Straw accepted Stuart Smith's findings, describing them as dispassionate and objective. Of course, the families were outraged. The MPs in Merseyside who played a big part in trying to suppress criticism of the scrutiny report were former Home Office Minister George Howarth, the now retired former Defence Minister Peter Kilfoyle, and the former Labour Whip Jane Kennedy. The loyal careerist Jane Kennedy, who retired as an MP in 2010, has recently been selected by the Labour Party to run for the first Merseyside Police Commissioner on a salary of something in the region of £85,000 per year. On the 12th of February 1998, 6 days before the families and the House of Commons were presented with the scrutiny report, these three MPs had a meeting which was attended by George Howarth's Parliamentary Assistant Secretary, Linda Rushton, who wrote about what was said at the meeting and sent a copy of it to Jack Straw. Such was Labour's fears about the way the report would be received by the families and the people of Merseyside. They felt they had to neutralise, in other words, dumb down the media, to lessen the disappointing outcome of the report. In my opinion, what was written in this letter was extraordinary and surely proves how insensitive these MPs were to the suffering of the families and the constituents they were supposed to be representing across Merseyside. This letter, and there are many others like it on the Hillsborough Independent website, is an extraordinary insight into how the Labour Party behaved at this particular time in history. Let's take a closer look at what was said in this letter. They would try and ensure that all local MPs were on message, i.e. would support the government's position once the report is published, without revealing to the MPs the conclusion of the report in advance. The letter continues that the three MPs would also try to neutralise the local media in advance of publication and the Home Secretary's statement. Jane Kennedy will speak to Granada. Mr Howard will speak to the Liverpool Echo and Radio Merseyside. And it would be a good idea for Ed Owen to speak to his contact at the Daily Post. This would obviously require revealing the slant of the report, however, without entering into the details of the report. It was also extraordinary the way the Labour Party turned the delivery of this flawed scrutiny report into what resembled a military exercise in secrecy and planning. They were even writing scripts of what Merseyside MPs should ask during the debate following the Home Secretary's statement. The letter continues. It was considered that Ed Owen should prepare questions for Paddy Tipping to distribute to Merseyside MPs to ask during the debate following the Home Secretary's statement. In articles written in the Liverpool Echo on the 28th of September 2012 and in the Sunday Independent on the 30th of September 2012, the three MPs in question claim that what Linda Rushton recorded at the meeting was not true. Former MP Jane Kennedy, the Labour candidate in November's election for Merseyside's first Police and Crime Commissioner, said the idea the MPs would have tried to influence the coverage of the local press that had campaigned for years on Hillsborough was ludicrous. Mr Howarth blamed Miss Rushton and said he would never have used words like neutralise the local media. Peter Kilfoyle said no such meeting took place. It sounds to me like a report of an informal conversation. It is quite obvious, even to the most casual observer, that this letter is a true short version of what actually took place at the meeting. As for the language that was used, this is similar to the narrative that is used on most of the government documents that are contained within the Independent Panel's website. As was reported in the Liverpool Echo and the Sunday Independent, all three MPs cast aspersions on the way in which Linda Rushton reported this meeting. Let's take a brief look at just a few qualifications that an Assistant Parliamentary Secretary needs before they are even considered for this very important job. Qualifications and experience. To properly deliver the requirements of this post, it is expected the post holder will have the following. 1. Excellent communications and interpersonal skills, both written and oral, with a sound knowledge of the English language. 2. Very good organisational skills and accurate record keeping. Why on earth would a well-respected government aide deliberately doctor the minutes of a meeting that was attended by a government whip and 2 ministers? It beggars belief. Before we go any further, it would be interesting to see how the local media reacted to this extraordinary story. It is quite clear that the Liverpool Echo gave a somewhat favourable spin in support of the three MPs, whilst the national newspaper, the Sunday Independent, gave a more professional and objective spin on the story. On the same day the story appeared, the obviously pro-Labour Echo editor, Alistair McRae, wrote in the Echo's comments section what can only be described as an extraordinary, sycophantic, emotive comment. Hillsborough, the Echo was not gagged. As part of our ongoing coverage of the Hillsborough panel's report, we today include a sinister suggestion that 3 local MPs were asked to neutralise the local media, including the Liverpool Echo. He further went on to say, Linda Rushton, who worked for Knowsley MP George Howarth when he was a Home Office Minister, claimed in a letter to the then Home Secretary Jack Straw that Mr Howarth had met with Wavertree MP Jane Kennedy and former Walton MP Peter Kilfoyle, and that they had agreed to neutralise the local media. It didn't happen, and it is an insult to suggest that we would allow ourselves to be treated in such a way, and it's insulting to MPs who have been superb servants to the people of Merseyside. No approaches were made. Then, amazingly, with typical sycophantic aplomb, he sings praises to the Merseyside MPs, especially Jane Kennedy. The Echo editor concluded with, Jane Kennedy is spot on when she says the idea they could in any way influence our Hillsborough coverage is ludicrous. Again, as all this lady was doing was her job, which on that particular day entailed recording a meeting so that Jack Straw knew what was said at the meeting. What on earth is sinister about that? In my opinion, the Labour Party are really concerned about this Linda Rushton affair, because former MP Jane Kennedy, as has already been stated, is campaigning to be the new Merseyside Police Commissioner, and this kind of bad publicity could affect the way Merseyside people vote for her. It is also interesting to note the first Echo article reporting the neutralising of the media was printed on Tuesday the 28th of September, just a couple of days before the Labour Party conference took place in Manchester. This gave the Labour Party machine time to swing into action to try to deflect any damage the story could cause. On the following day, Wednesday the 29th of September, the leader of the Labour Party, Ed Miliband, appeared in the Liverpool Echo, trumpeting, "I'll help Hillsborough families." He said, "I want to pay tribute to the people of Liverpool. They kept the flame alive when too many people in power didn't care about the problem and the injustice which was being done." How astonishingly hypocritical. It was his party that perpetrated these injustices onto the families by supporting the views of the establishment. Then, on Monday the 1st of October, whilst the Labour conference was still going on, a spontaneous demonstration was held outside Norman Bettison's headquarters in Leeds. Although a worthy pursuit, it was probably another diversion organised by the Labour Party. Duly, this was reported in the Echo. The Echo reported, protests were held outside the West Yorkshire headquarters of Under Fire Police Chief Sir Norman Bettison. More than 60 people campaigned outside Leeds Millgate Station, calling on Mr Bettison to be stripped of his knighthood and dismissed from the force. This Labour Party manipulation finally ended on Friday the 5th of October, with Jack Straw meeting members of the Hillsborough families and making a nervous, grovelling apology, the Echo reported. Jack Straw meets Hillsborough Family Support Group to apologise face to face. Whose side is the Echo on? This sort of reportage surely proves how manipulative the Liverpool Echo is. But it wasn't just the Liverpool Echo who were bending over backwards to help Jane Kennedy in her Police Commissioner campaign. On the BBC Radio Merseyside Roger Phillips phone-in show, Roger sang praises to Jane Kennedy and constantly interrupted English Democrat candidate Paul Rimmer.
She said to the family there's nothing new to find, and that was a lie, Roger. She's still saying she said nothing now.
She's not saying nothing now at all.
She said, his name, Peter Kilfoyle, he said the meeting didn't take place.
Yes.
Jane Kennedy's saying that it didn't take place.
The three of them, George Howarth, The three of them have denied what was written in a letter, if I remember rightly, or a memo, by an officer in Jack Straw's office who reported something with hearsay, and they've all three denied it. They say it is not true.
Well, I did that letter. It was in the Independent.
But look, I tell you what, you go and ask some of the people in her constituency that time, or indeed in Peters, or indeed in George House, whether or not they were supportive. And I can tell you, because I know some of those people, they were very supportive of those individuals.
What Roger Phillips has just said here is simply not true. Let's take a closer look at what the Hillsborough Family Support Group thought of George Howarth, Jack Straw and other Merseyside MPs, including Jane Kennedy. It was reported in the Liverpool Daily Post on the 19th of February 1998, one day after the flawed scrutiny report was made public. MPs in firing line, campaigners warning after Hillsborough betrayal. Trevor Hicks, chairman of the Hillsborough Family Support Group, said, "We are absolutely gutted. We are disgusted with the report. It is a better whitewash than the last time because it is more professionally done. We will call on Jack Straw and George Howarth to resign and for the Merseyside MPs to stand up and be counted." Roger Phillips, whilst arguing with Paul Rimmer on his show, makes the assertion that these MPs were very supportive. Does this look like they were? Yet again, it beggars belief. English Democrat Paul Rimmer can only get onto the Roger Phillips phone-in show by using a pseudonym. On a second attempt by Paul to highlight this injustice, Roger Phillips hung the phone up on him.
Well, why have we got this divisive candidate in Liverpool, Jane Kennedy, who betrayed
I'm fed up with this. Look, this station is not to be used to sort of campaign or not campaign for any candidate or have a go at any individual who's not here to defend themselves, especially based on something that's been completely denied by all the candidates all the politicians who were accused of it, and all the media outlets who were accused of it. It's an absolute waste of our time. It's just stupid.
In my opinion, it is quite obvious that the Liverpool local media is trying to cover this issue up and is working to the maxim that nothing must be said or done that can harm the chances of Jane Kennedy being voted in by the people of Merseyside as the new police commissioner. If you read the Sunday Independent, you will understand more clearly what these three MPs were up to and why they were trying to suppress the findings of the scrutiny report and neutralise the press. The Independent article, which was written on the 30th of September 2012, stated, "Details of a spin operation by the government in the late 1990s set up to suppress media criticism and pressure from campaigners angry at its decision not to hold a second public inquiry into Hillsborough emerged this weekend. It became clear that senior Home Office civil servants had agreed a plan to neutralise the local media before the publication of the Lord Justice Stuart Smith's much criticised 1998 report, in which the judge concluded that there was no case for a new inquiry. They also briefed Liverpool MPs to ensure they were on message ahead of Jack Straw's announcement on the Stuart Smith's report. Let's take a closer look at the report, which was written by George Howarth's Assistant Private Secretary, Linda Rushton, on the 12th of February 1998. At the beginning of the report, it states quite clearly, "As requested, Mr Howarth met Jane Kennedy and Peter Kilfoyle yesterday evening to discuss the handling of the publication of the Hillsborough scrutiny and the Home Secretary's response to its recommendations. They agreed the following." The words "as requested" are used. This means that someone requested the meeting. This also means that this request was made at a previous briefing. In fact, 3 days earlier, on the 9th of February, Linda Rushton, in a previous letter, said, "Mr Howarth has seen Paul Pugh's submission of the 6th of February concerning the handling arrangements for the publication of Lord Justice Stuart Smith's report and has commented, 'Having read the submission and report carefully, I agree with the recommendations in the submission and the conclusions in the report.' On handling, I think that the proposed arrangements prior to and following the statement are suitable. However, I reiterate that I feel we should involve both Jane Kennedy and Peter Kilfoyle in discussions about handling and other arrangements. In practice, this will have to be arranged for this week. As previously stated, this letter was written to the Home Secretary on the 9th of February, and as a result, the Neutralise the Media meeting took place on the 12th of February. This is surely cast iron proof that the meeting that Peter Kilfoyle said never took place did in fact take place. But amazingly, it doesn't stop there. Only a week or so after the articles were written in the Liverpool Echo and the Sunday Independent, Judge Howarth made a statement on his official website. He stated, "The memo from Linda Rushton, dated the 12th of February 1998, did not convey the specific terms of any discussion between me and Jane Kennedy or Peter Kilfoyle. The terms on message and neutralise the local media were her words, not words we would have used. Our overriding concern was to ensure that the feelings of the families were dealt with respectively and sensitively." A more accurate representation of my concerns at that time is reflected in the memo from Paul Pugh to Linda Rushton, dated the 28th of January 1998, which refers to my suggestion that the failure on the part of the South Yorkshire Police to disclose sections of the videotapes should be deplored. If we scroll down the link to the next memo, we see another memo dated the 27th of January 1998, in which it states, "As I mentioned yesterday, Mr. Howarth feels that in view of the reaction that this report will provoke on Merseyside, it would be helpful if a meeting could be arranged between himself, the Home Secretary, Jane Kennedy and Peter Kilfoyle, who are also both Liverpool MPs, before the handling arrangements are finalised. He was content with your suggestion today that he could discuss this matter informally with the Home Secretary. However, he feels that a meeting with the above would be necessary." George Howarth further stated on his website, "The context of this material is that I was conscious that the families would be disappointed at the outcome of this Stuart Smith review, as I was myself, and that public statements had to be mindful of their legitimate feelings." If we go back to the previously mentioned memo or letter written on the 9th of February, George Howarth quite clearly states, "I agree with the recommendations in the submission and the conclusions in the scrutiny report." So he agreed with everything that Lord Stuart Smith had written in the scrutiny report. What a hypocrite. George Howarth states on his website, "I was conscious that the families would be disappointed at the outcome of the Stuart Smith review, as I was myself." How on earth could he have shared the same disappointment of this cover-up scrutiny report as the families did, when he states he agreed with what was written in the report? It beggars belief. We now have 3 memos or letters, each merging into the other. The first memo or letter was written on the 27th of January. The second memo or letter, referring to a meeting of the 3 MPs, was written on the 9th of February. And the final memo or letter, which concerned neutralising the media, was written on the 12th of February. It's also quite obvious that this word handling was a collective attempt by the MPs and government aides to deceitfully suppress and keep secret what they were really up to.
It is clear that Linda Rushton's account is accurate, and that the Labour MP's attempt to discredit her language is just a ruse to cover their guilt. Why were they so keen to do Jack Straw's bidding? Not to hurt the families? I don't think so. The families were outraged by the scrutiny and the failure of the Labour MPs to effectively challenge it. They knew that their campaign for justice would be put back indefinitely. No, the Labour MPs stayed on message for the simple reason that their loyalty was to the party and not the people, to their own careers and not to combat the continuing injustice. Jane Kennedy remains a politician undeserving of our sympathy and our vote.